Well, we're back doing track plans again today, and we're off on an interesting subject, something that a lot of people use and a lot of people really use, but the whole concept of stacking up your layouts. So you can place one section of layout above the rest of the layout. I suppose you could go below the layout too, and in fact I've tried that. Doesn't work very well, but at least you can stack up above your existing layout with another layer of layout, another level. So here we have a basic layout design. Let's say this layout goes all the way around the room. You're fortunate enough to have like a stairway coming into this area from above or below so that you can run your layout all the way around the outside wall uninterrupted without any duck unders or anything. And let's just say we've placed our benchwork at about 48 inches off the floor, which is kind of a nice height, 42 to 48 inches, so that it's right there kind of at elbow height. That makes for working on it very nice. And it makes for getting underneath it better. But if we really want to expand the footprint of our layout without actually pulling it further out into the room, which can create all kinds of access problems, what about just adding a second level to the layout, maybe only about 2 feet above the existing layout so that it's about 6 feet off the floor? You can still get to it and you can see it easily. The access is a little more tricky, but it's workable. Now here we can see Steve Stribble's layout, and that's exactly what he's done here, just to create more places to run trains and track and mostly built structures, given that it's Steve's layout. He's added a second level up here with a track that goes up a mountain to access the upper level. I did this exact same thing on my old HO layout. It had an upper level that went all the way around the room. Of course, it was a plywood desert because I never finished it. So with this upper level at about 6 feet off the floor, it's a little bit of a challenge to see. It's a little bit of a challenge to work on. And what you really need to have is like a little stepping stool so that you can easily get up there to see what you're doing or work on something. But you can also add some interesting lighting effects to the bottom of the upper level to light up the lower level. Now, typically you're going to want some way to get trains from the upper level down to the lower level and vice versa. And what some people will use is a helix. There are kits that you can buy. In fact, this is a picture of one of those kits in N scale. But you can construct your own, or it's much simpler to just buy one of the available kits if you're going to do a helix. You probably would want to put the helix somewhere where it doesn't really show, because there's no way to really adequately scenic this thing and make it look reasonable. The helix will certainly save a lot of space, but if you have the space to do it, a really fun way to do this is create a gigantic mountain and have your trains climb up by going around the mountain. I had that on my railroad, and you can see here that Steve Stribble had that on his railroad as well. It's just a much more pleasant way of getting your trains from the upper level to the lower level. Of course, if you don't want your trains to travel from the upper level to the lower level, there's no need to actually have them connected. This is what we have on the current railroad. The logging railroad is up 7 feet above the floor, but there's no way to get trains from the logging railroad down to the narrow gauge railroad. Now let's talk about a different idea when it comes to stacking. This isn't really stacking the railroad, but it's related to that. What if you put an elevated walkway to access the railroad so that you can put the railroad 6 feet off the floor instead of, say, 42 inches off the floor? The advantage here, I know it's expensive and it seems complicated, but the advantage is now you have 6 feet of clearance underneath your railroad, so you don't have to crawl around on the floor. And once you hit a certain age, there's a great desirability to not have to get down on the floor and crawl under the layout and work up over your head soldering wires and so on. You can just walk in here and you can even hang the wiring right on the wall. Of course, it helps if you have higher ceilings. At an 8-foot ceiling, your layout now is only 2 feet from the ceiling, and your head is practically hitting the ceiling as well. Now, just for fun, what if you have 10-foot ceilings or higher? What about doing a stacking railroad where you have one above the other, but put a walkway that's 4 feet off the floor, so that your upper level is still about 42 inches up. The lower level is about 42 inches up. Now, you do have to crawl around on the floor to get under part of this layout, but a lot of this layout, most of this layout is pretty easily accessed. And in that center area that we've indicated here, you can still have a little small area of shelf layout inside there. And I mean this only to be sort of a concept, a jumping off point. You don't have to have 2 walkways. You could have one. It doesn't necessarily be 4 feet up in the air. We were on one railroad in Grand Junction where they'd done this, and the walkway changed levels right along with the benchwork so that the trains could climb from one level to the other. And as it did, the walkway that you're standing on is also climbing from one level to the other. And boy, did that make operating smooth and nice. Of course, typically you're only going to be able to do something like this on a very, very, very large railroad. Again, conceptually, you might get some ideas for a much smaller railroad. But normally speaking, this would be some mega monster layout, even a club layout, something like that. But let's take a look at a railroad that was built this exact way. This is Verl Fosnight's railroad in Cornville, Arizona. The people in the shot here are standing on the floor of the building, and they're operating the lowest level, which is about 42 inches off the floor. The overhead, which they would be completely unaware of standing there, is the upper level of the railroad. The upper level of the railroad is operated from an elevated walkway, which is accessed from a short stairway. It's about 50 inches off the floor, something like that. In this shot, you can see the lower level down there where Karen is standing, and then the upper level, and I'm actually on an observation platform way above the entire railroad. But from here, you can actually see both levels of the railroad. Here we have people operating on the lower level, and the overhead above this railroad is actually the walkway for the level above. I mentioned that it's difficult to build a level of railroad below your basic benchwork, but here we can see that done. It's a staging yard, which is actually below the basic benchwork on the lower level. I mentioned before that there's an observation area above the entire railroad. This is that. It's accessed by a long stairway that brings you up here. And from here you can see the entire railroad stretched out below you. And you can get a hint of the lower level. Mostly you're seeing the upper level. I'm pushing that to the extreme most level of stacking. For the most part, people would build a railroad that would be stacked up much more like this. But I'm including these other ideas just by way of inspiration. And don't discount the idea of an elevated walkway. It's not all that difficult to create. And boy, the idea of having your benchwork up high enough that you don't have to crawl around on the floor is, well, it's frankly a big plus. And we were very inspired by that railroad in Grand Junction, Colorado that did this, where the elevated section ramped up and down following the grade of the trains so that the benchwork itself could grade up and down, and you could still easily access it from the walkway. Of course, the idea of doing like Verl has done and building a custom building with an interior steel structure to hold up your benchwork and walkways and everything is, well, let's say it's pretty much over the top for what most of us want to do. But there's always ideas that you can glean from something like this without spending the kind of money that Verl has spent on his railroad. What in the world have you spent here? Is that something you're comfortable talking about? Too much. Too much. Excellent. Yeah. Well, I hope you have found this inspirational, informative perhaps, and hopefully entertaining. And if so, I hope that if you're not a subscriber to the channel, you will want to become a subscriber to the channel. And the easy peasy way to do that is by clicking on the upcoming blue button. Zoink! Right there, the blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this video on the internet. We hope you did not find it boring, and we will see you here on Sunday, because Karen and I have something fun to show you. See you then. Bye-bye.